supposed to be 20 to 25-minute intensives to get you a little bit up to speed on some areas that tend to be typically problematic for students such as yourselves. And so this is one that I think is particularly interesting because for the most part, most people don't even realize that you can self-plagiarize. So I thought this cartoon kind of was very apropos, and it said, what are you in for? Grand Theft Auto. And the other guy goes, nope, I'm in for plagiarism. And so I just thought that was true because if you are an international student or even a student at all, this is something that can get you into jail with the university very easy, if that makes sense, and unfortunately kicked out. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around what is and what is not plagiarism. So my simple solution is always, if in doubt, cite. But it's kind of interesting if you even look at what the word plagiarism means. It is a Latin term, and the meaning is to kidnap. So stop and think about that for a second. If I am plagiarizing something, I am actually stealing or taking it without permission. So think about that. When you're kidnapped, someone is taking you without their permission. And so I think that is a very good way to think about when you're looking at ideas and philosophies and thoughts and even your own, in the case of self-plagiarism, that you are truly kidnapping that unless you attribute and make sure that everyone knows and understands where you got that information from. So self-plagiarism, kind of a new term for many of you, as I understand. And let's look at it just a little bit more in depth. So basically it means reusing any work that has already been published or submitted by you for another class. Or for those of you that have already done master's theses, or even some of you that have already written a dissertation, anything coming out of that has to be cited just as if it were someone else's work. It also means, of course, what everybody is used to thinking of, and that is paraphrasing passages and recycling old data. Again, if you have ever put it in a paper in the past or put it in any of your academic work, then you have to cite at what point in time you did that. Now let's stop for a second and talk about what's the difference in that in your opinion. If it's your opinion and you've stated that opinion somewhere in the past, you can do that again, but you need to word it and verbiage it as thus, in my opinion, or as I have said previously. So that again, you're putting it back into the own personage of yourself, but not into a literal word or research or data or textual connotations that you have used in the past. All right. The bottom line though with self-plagiarism is it misleads your readers. And it makes them think that this is brand new work, that you spent a lot of time on the project, that you've actually done work for this particular class, when in reality, and unfortunately, it's just something that you have cut and pasted, no different than if you go out on the internet and find it from someone else. It's just that it was even easier this time because it's something that you had written before. And basically, bottom line, that's not okay. So stop and think about what's happening today with many of you. You are getting the Safe Assign reports that come through with all of your work that you upload into the Blackboard shell for all of your courses, and you're getting very, very high Safe Assign scores. Well, why is that? Well, Safe Assign color codes and tells you essentially where everything came from. And it's not only telling you that, but it's also telling your faculty person that. So if the faculty person suddenly sees in the report line after line after line that says prior student paper, prior student paper, prior student paper, they can't tell from that whether it was your prior student paper or another student's prior student paper. But it doesn't matter that they can't tell that. The bottom line is somebody else has already written this in exactly this form, and therefore you are plagiarizing in this instance at this moment in time. So again, keep in mind that that is the misleading piece of it that suddenly kind of sends the spidey sense hairs up on your instructor's back that you're trying to cut corners and you're trying to do shortcuts. And in my opinion, it's kind of ironic because the bottom line is in a lot of cases, it takes you a whole heck of a lot longer to go find that old paper, go cut and paste this stuff, make it work within this paper than it would if you just sat down and typed out the paragraph that you're getting ready to write at this point in time. So can you steal from yourself? Well, the answer is yes. It's conceptualized as theft. And even though it may seem impossible from oneself, think of it no different than when one engages in embezzlement or insurance fraud. That is stealing from yourself, and there's really no difference. I am taking something from myself that I either am going to receive in the future benefit, or I've already received in the past in some benefit. It occurs when you reuse your own work and not letting people know that it's your own work. So again, that piece of the puzzle is very, very clear. You cannot use your own work again without citation. Now listen to what I just said. Without citation, you can use your own work, but you have to cite. I already used this, and here's the paper and the narrative and where I was at that point in time when I cited. And again, the essence of self-plagiarism is that the author attempts to deceive the reader. And that again is wherein most of the angst lies, in that as soon as I discover that you're doing this from a faculty perspective, you become suspect to me. And I don't like that. And so suddenly I'm not only going to start looking at this paper with a much more critical eye, but I may be looking at all of your work with a much more critical eye. And where I was terribly impressed with your work in the past and your critical thinking and the way that you went through actually creating the work, all of a sudden, now I'm sitting here going, is it really theirs? Maybe it's not really theirs. And you know, now I just can't trust this person. And that's the operative word. It's the trust issue. And trust, as we all know, once broken, is very hard to reestablish. And then you have to not only rebuild that trust piece, but you have to build it even to a higher level than it was before. And so think about it from a bigger macro standpoint. When you just want to go pull that, they'll never know. Well, they do. There's lots of ways that the faculty finds out, not just from the Safe Assign report or at other universities that might have used Turnitin. That's not it. It's also in the nature and the way that it is written and the expectation of how much knowledge you may have had before based on something that we know about you from the past. So my bottom line is you can absolutely pull that work for reference, but then you turn around and write it for the specificity that's required in the current scenario that you're being asked to write in. It's just that easy. So there's a lot of opinions and kind of some interesting facts. I'm going to put the glasses on so I can see these. So number one, about 60% of both faculty and students clearly do not know what self-plagiarism entails. And let me expand on this just a little bit. Self-plagiarism becomes more and more apparent and relevant and significant the higher in your level of education that you go. Self-plagiarism occurs some, but not a lot when you're at the bachelor's level. It occurs at a moderate amount in the master's level, but once you get to the level in which you are currently enrolled with us, which is an executive program, at this level and higher, this and doctoral degrees and the ones that are moving up, this is where we see more and more and more of the plagiarism that is self-created. And that makes sense because you've built a larger and larger body of work that's out there. And so also you were talking at things at a higher scholarly level, and you're also talking about things in much greater depth than you do when you're writing a general paper about, say, what the Amazon River is when you're an undergrad. And so that is why it gets more and more problematic for you to not plagiarize, and why it actually becomes easier for you to actually be accused of plagiarizing, self-plagiarizing, because your body of work gets bigger and bigger and bigger. One of the things that you'll notice if any of you are listening to the Supreme Court nomination hearings this week is that she is always citing herself and in which scenario Coney Barrett actually wrote about something. And a lot of it was in her academic writing when she was a faculty person at Notre Dame. And so she is always citing at what point in time she wrote that particular thing And then, of course, they're asking her why she wrote it and what she really meant when she wrote it. But the bottom line is, it is now out there in the world as something of her work. And from this day forward, she will always have to cite that. 60% of students do not feel it's necessary to cite their own previous works. And again, that kind of ties back to what we've already talked about. But the bottom line is, you do. And so you need to just get used to that and start citing. And if you want to write original, then write original, because in a lot of cases it's easier than going back, finding the passage, cutting and pasting it, and then citing. So if you hear kind of a sense of over and over again from me, it's write original. It's faster and it's easier, in my opinion, than it is to go and try to hide and fix what you're trying to plagiarize. 80%, stop and think about that. 8 out of 10 of your faculty will consider failing to cite a student's own work as self-plagiarism. We are academicians. We deal with this all day, every day. The faculty that you have in the Ottawa University Executive MBA program have been around for a long time. Not that they're old or long in tooth, but they have been around for a long time, and they absolutely have seen it all. And so the short answer is, they can catch it, they will catch it, and they do report. And so the bottom line is, again, we see it and we don't need to see it. All right. Many students believe that recycling their writing, as long as it is their big original work, is an effective use of their time. And they believe that it's only the failure to cite. But again, it's not just that. In all honesty, I think it's faster to write original work than it is to go back and try to recycle the work that you've already done. You can draw upon that original work, but every assignment that you have has some unique nuance that's different from whatever you did before. I mean, it may be 1 in 100 assignments that you could literally say, I've already done this exact assignment. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. If that's the case, what might you do? But the bottom line is, write original work. It doesn't take that long. And I think once you get in the habit of doing that, you'll discover that it's actually a whole lot easier, a whole lot better, and a whole lot more robust process than trying to do all this recycling. And then finally, while faculty may not hold definite opinions of plagiarism, they may feel the student who uses portions of their previous work are trying to deceive them in some manner. And again, that's the biggie. Don't make your professor mad. The last thing you want to do is to have them get on your bad side. And guys, this is one of the easiest ways to do that, because then we start questioning everything. So don't do it. I mean, it's just that simple. Realize that there is this piece of the puzzle, that now that you are at the level that you are in your academic education, you are also at a level that is expecting original work at all times. And I know some of you are actually publishing. Some of you have published. And again, the last thing you want to get caught doing is having something in a published narrative that then gets out there only to discover that it's plagiarized. Okay? So there's 2 kinds of plagiarism. One is intentional, and one is unintentional. So just quickly in chat, I'm curious, do you think that self-plagiarism is intentional plagiarism or unintentional plagiarism? Just very quickly. And I'll let Courtney monitor the chat and tell us what the results are.
We've got 1 unintentional, but some unintentionals coming in.
A lot of unintentionals?
Yep, looks like it.
Okay.
Kind of both, depending on the situation. Unintentional. Looks like unintentional is definitely winning.
Okay. All right. Okay. While we're waiting for those, I just also want you to know that all of these slides today, these are your fellow peers. You may not know all of these people because you're at different campuses, but I just wanted to mention these individuals that you were looking at the moment on this particular slide. These individuals were in a ground-based MBA IT program about 5 years ago. They were a cohort, a mighty cohort of 12, and they lived in Kansas City and actually did their entire program on ground. They have all gone on to do CPT for their 3 years. A couple of them have gotten married and are still in the country, and the others have all gone back to primarily India, although they were from a couple different countries, to live and work and prosper. They were just a great group, and we got to know them extremely well because they were around us and with us all the time. So, okay, Courtney, any change, or are we going with unintentional more than intentional?
Looks like we are sticking with unintentional.
Okay, all right. So let's put up the intentional things. So with intentional, it's pre-written papers as your own new original work, cutting and pasting from prior paper sources without quoting or citing the sources, and resubmitting assignments week over week. How many of you would like to change your vote from unintentional to intentional? Getting any changes?
A few changes, some no changes.
Okay.
Kind of split 50-50 it looks like right now.
I am swaying some minds here. All right.
Oh, we do have a question though, Dr. DeWald. Is rewording considered unintentional?
Ah, good deal. Hold that thought. We also call that paraphrasing. Okay. Okay. So with unintentional, look at these, what unintentional self-plagiarism. It's lazy paraphrasing and quoting. And so that is exactly what I am hearing in that question. Although we call that paraphrasing, you absolutely can reword, and in essence, that's exactly what you have to do. When you have read a passage, whether it's your own or someone else's, and you are now deciding that you want to use that passage in your new paper, rewording is absolutely valid. And that is exactly what you do, and that is called paraphrasing. Because unintentional self-plagiarism is when you're just lazy at that and you don't go to the trouble to, again, put it into the context of whatever this new particular paper is that you are working on. Or you kind of get your citation messed up. It's there, but it's not exactly right. Or you just flat out do not understand the research process and you are using inappropriate sources of work. So to answer that question, rewriting is what we want you to do. You do need to rewrite these things because, again, there's only so much originality that you can put into something that's like a definition or whatever. But the bottom line is you have to be careful that you're not getting lazy, because then you may still end up being a plagiarist, a self-plagiarist, but it's not the intentionality of the above. So let's be clear on this. Most self-plagiarism is intentional. Most of it, because you are intentionally going to that prior paper to save yourself time. And you cut it and you paste it and you don't cite it. Or you cut it and you paste it and in 2/3 of the entire paper is cited from the old paper without change. Every bit of that is intentional because there is forethought of action, and that's what makes it intentional. Unintentional on the backside is I am rewriting it, but I'm doing a pretty poor job of it. I'm just not really getting into the nature of the work and the way that I should do it. So again, stop and think where you are in your academic careers. You are not at an associate's level any longer. You're not at a bachelor's level any longer. You're not even at a first master's level any longer. For most of you, you have had a very deep well of master's work at a very respected university. You are now at the executive master's level, and it is over and above. Stop and think what your criteria were to get into this program. Not only did you have to have a really good academic background, but you have to have work experience. And that work experience, again, means that you know how to go out into the world, take what you know, the knowledge that you have, and apply it to the work scenario. And so again, you are at this level, and people at this level should not be cutting and pasting their work from the past. So I'm trying to shame you a little bit here, and it's intentional because, again, this is where you are in your degree field. You are not just even at another master's. You chose an executive master's, which puts you head and shoulders above everyone else and will do you very well down the line because you're getting your breadth now rather than just that depth. But you've got to be careful that you're not trying to get lazy on us and just do some easy cut things to save yourself time and energy and effort. All right, I want to talk before we end about the executive practicum course specifically, because this tends to be the area that we are seeing the most self-plagiarism in. Okay, so what am I seeing and what are our faculty seeing that is causing us to feel that this is highly problematic and that it's getting worse? And basically the biggest one is we're seeing everybody literally take their week 1 through week 7 memos, cut them and paste them in the week 8 and go, okay, I'm good to go. No, no, that's a big no. That is not the intention of your week 8 memo. If you think of this, weeks 1 through 7 is practical application where you are writing that memo in that week, applying whatever the learning that week is back to your work scenario, or if it isn't applicable directly, then you are doing some sort of theoretical, I think this is how I would use it at some point in the future. Week 8, on the other hand, is much more macro. It's a reflection back about the topic area in total and what you've learned about that relative to your real world job experience. It is not a cut and paste of weeks 1 through 7 with a summary paragraph. That is not what your week 8 memo is. Your week 8 memo is a newly created, newly crafted paper that's short, 2 to 3 pages, that reflects back on what you did in your memos in weeks 1 through 7, but it is not just a repeat of what you do in weeks 1 through 7. And a lot of you that have been hit with self-plagiarism issues is because of this one and this one alone. It's just going in and cutting and pasting what you should not be doing in the cutting and pasting. Or you're just cutting sections and segments from previous memos. Or, and the one that I see a lot on this, is you take week 8 memo from the class before or 2 classes before, and then turn around and cut and paste this back in. Same thing, you're not writing original work. So again, I know I sound like I'm harping, but the bottom line is that week 8 memo is original work. It is original, tied to that specific class, and of all things to be cutting and trying to self-plagiarize from, the executive practicums in my mind are the least logical because every course is different. And the nuance that you should be writing with, or to in these courses, is such that cutting and pasting just shouldn't be making any sense whatsoever if you're actually doing what you need to do. Now, how long should this take you each week? You should be able to write one of these memos in 15 minutes. And again, the reason I say that is because it's practical application of the material that week directly to your job. This is as personal as anything gets, because it is an I and a we and my job and this sort of thing. And it's not going out and doing research in the outside world. It's the personalization of the stuff in executive practicum that makes it so that there should never, ever, ever be any self-plagiarism within executive practicum. You're going to get high scores in executive practicum for plagiarism because that memo pulls that stuff up. And as many people have said, and we've encouraged you, you need to strip out all those instructions at the top to get that score down a little bit. But all of your instructors know this. They know exactly what that thing is pulling. It's pulling the template itself. But there should be a 0 score on the 3 to 4 paragraphs that you are writing within each one of the questions, not paragraphs, sentences that you are writing within each one of the questions that you address each week. Because it should be all brand new original work, because each course is a brand new course with brand new topical material and brand new ways of looking at it and applying it. And then finally, this is the other thing that we are consistently seeing, is that those of you that have done a very detailed master's thesis, we are getting a high level of self-plagiarism against those original master's thesis. I know you did a lot of work for those master's thesis in your first master's work. We're very proud that you have done that. But again, don't use that without rewriting it, or in this case, that is absolutely the kind of paper that you would cite, because that was a high level of work, and it is scholarly, in basis and would be something that I would be proud to rewrite, but you've got to cite the original on the back side. Okay, so I know this seems like a gray area. This is Arizona, by the way. These kids are all some of our early Arizona kids. Y'all may have crossed paths with some of them if you're down in Arizona. But the bottom line is it's really about academic honesty. And that's the thing that that's what we've got to uphold. And it's not just us at Ottawa. This is the expectation across the globe. When you are in a high level academic program, you are expected to do original work. It's just that simple. So I hope your eyes are a little more wide open. So what can you do then? How do you avoid it? Do not use your old assignments. Even as much as you might like to, don't use those. So you can go back, read the old assignment, refresh yourself on what you've done, but then turn around and take the few minutes to write that new one. And then, as I said earlier, and this is what I wanted to come back to, you need to talk to your instructor. Let's say that this assignment that you have been given by your instructor is literally exactly the same thing as what you are being asked to do now to something you have done in the past. Talk to your instructor and see if there's maybe an alternative that you could do instead, or that you could submit this with some additional stuff around it. Your instructors are very open to these sorts of things, and they probably don't want you just repeating something you've already done. Let's always have an additional learning opportunity regardless of what the scenario is. And again, my word I always use is proactive. Be proactive. Reach out to the instructor first and go, you know what? I could turn in this paper that is exactly what you were asking me to do, but I'm not going to do this. But I wanted you to see it and see what your suggestions are for how you want me to take this paper that I have already literally written on this topical area and move it to something else. So again, proactive. The operative word there is proactive. And again, your instructors know this and understand this, and they don't want you just doing busy work. That is absolutely the last thing on the face of the planet that any of you want to have you do. I hate busy work. I make sure that we don't have busy work in there. And in an executive program, that is the last thing that we are trying to make you do. So finally, there is a way that you can look at this, and it's just to look at these three things. Think about your intro. Think about your source material, think about your citations, and then finally think about your interpretations of that material. So when you are trying to build the paper, if you think of those four distinct pieces, you will quickly come up with my citations are valid, my source material is valid, everything that I am doing in the writing of this is original, and I'm going to be good to go. Or I am spending all of my time trying to cut and paste things from everywhere else, and I'm not going to be okay. But hopefully, if you keep in mind these four puzzle pieces as you could kind of look at them, it's going to make the process a whole lot better. So I promise to keep this to 30 minutes. I've gone 2 minutes over. And at this juncture, I'm going to stop. And if there are questions, we can certainly take a couple questions. If not, you're more than free to go.
We do have one question, Dr. DeWald. It's, can I reword others, or will that be considered plagiarism?
Other people's work, if you reword, that's called paraphrasing. And as long as you are very good at the paraphrasing, you still should probably cite the original material. So if in doubt, always cite. You can never cite too much. I would encourage all of you to go out and find a doctoral dissertation somewhere and read it. You don't have to read but about 4 or 5 pages. And what you'll quickly discover is that essentially the way that we think of academia in a large part is that there are no original thoughts. Someone has always thought of everything else. So if you are not way away from what that original thought was in your paraphrasing, it does not hurt to throw a citation down for that as well. I mean, some of my colleagues may have a different opinion on that, but that's mine. Oversighting is never going to get penalized. Let me put it that way. But what I really, really want y'all to take away and do is I want you to write yourself. I want you to sit down. I want you to research the material. I want you to then turn around and write these things. and then go back and go, okay, I probably should put a citation here, here, and here. And this is where I found that underlying original work that I have now talked about in my own words and in my own opinion. Does that help? Good question.
Looks like I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat at this time.
Well, thank you all for joining us. Next week, I'll turn it back over to Courtney and Jamie to talk about what Hack 3 is. You'll have a good week.
Thank you so much, Dr. DeWald. So as Dr. DeWald mentioned, this was hack number 2 in our series for Simplify Your Studies. Hack number 3 is going to be Think Like an Executive and Expand Your Perspective. That will be occurring October 29th at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. And just like you guys had for this hack, you will receive a flyer with a little bit more information with the Zoom login, and we'll be sure to include that Zoom password. And then we will see you at that time. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at emba@ottawa.edu, and we hope to see you guys then. Thank you.